Hello, everyone, and welcome to ND Inspo, where our goal is to connect, grow, and inspire naturopathic doctors and students from all over. My name is Dr. Kierstin DeWitt, and today I have with me Dr. Apar Salji. Dr. Apar holds a degree in yoga and naturopathic medicine, as well as a PhD in philosophy, where his thesis was on the neurocognitive and psychophysiological changes following breath holding as prescribed in yoga. Dr. Apar's research has been published in multiple peer-reviewed journals and magazines, and he has many others that are currently being reviewed. He is the head of academics for yoga and naturopathic medical programs, as well as the professor for the undergraduate, master level, and PhD programs. Clinically, Dr. Apar is the physician in charge for the Department of Rheumatology and Peripheral Musculoskeletal Diseases at the university's teaching hospital. So he is so involved, he has so many things going on, which is fantastic. But Dr. Apar and I actually met several years ago at the International Congress on Naturopathic Medicine World Conference that was held in Barcelona. And at that time, I believe, Dr. Apar, that you were presenting on one of your research studies.
I was,
Yeah, and we got to meet with Dr. Shreya, who is so great.
Yeah.
And I saw that you did an interview with her. You guys did a presentation on various yogic breathings, which is very
we did that very recently during the COVID-19.
Yeah, it's really thorough. You guys walk through the steps of so many different types of breath work, which we all know is great for stress, and there's just so many benefits to it. So I definitely recommend checking that out as well. But I really wanted Dr. Apar to come on today to talk about his experience, his journey through naturopathic medicine and yoga, and the differences that there might be in as it's practiced in India, as it's studied in India, but also the similarities, because I think it's just really fascinating how naturopathic medicine is practiced throughout the world. We've already seen with the different people that I've interviewed so far how it differs even just within our own country, and so I think it's equally fascinating how it's practiced throughout the world. So Dr. Apar, if you wouldn't mind just taking a moment to kind of tell us about what brought you to naturopathic medicine and yoga.
In India, it all began with my father, who is actually a medical doctor, getting with the lifestyle program of Dean Ornish. He started conducting workshops and seminars across the state where I belong to. And the trust was on lifestyle and living healthy and all of that. So I was very keen on learning about nutrition, which was a major part of that, yoga, which was another part, the physical activity. And then I came to this particular university where I work now in 2003. At that time, there were very few colleges where yoga or naturopathic medicine was taught in India. And I was part of a couple of research projects, which as a subject, which were conducted by a few of my seniors who graduated from my college. And they were the ones who actually told me that there is a program which is a medical program in yoga and naturopathy. And that's how it is in India. The way you have in US, NCCIH, we have Ayush, that's Ayurveda, yoga and naturopathy, Siddha, homeopathy, and Unani medicine. So that's the bifurcation that we have in India, and each of them have medical programs. So for Ayurveda, there is a separate medical program. For yoga and naturopathy, there is another one. So I graduated from one of the first medical colleges offering yoga and naturopathy medicine degree in India in 2009. Have worked with a couple of big institutions, National Institute of Naturopathy, which is again a federal government organization working in naturopathy. I was fortunate to work there at a very young stage of my career. And then, but my passion was teaching, and that brought me back to my college and the university where I teach presently. I was also very passionate about yoga, and that is what made me go for my higher studies in yoga and the research. So my university specializes in yoga research, although we do have Ayurveda college and naturopathy college. But we have been working extensively on yoga research. In fact, we were the first to publish a randomized controlled trial on yoga therapy in 1985. So the journey is a very long one. We have close to about 15% of total yoga research done world over, which is published in index journals. So one of the thrust areas that we have at our university is research, and that is what fascinated me to take that up as my career. And in the process, of course, I also take care of my desire to teach young fellows who want to choose a career in yoga and naturopathy. So
Mm-hmm.
that's in brief what I do.
Yeah, it sounds like because you found this balance between the academic side of being able to do research, but also be able to teach, and then the clinical side of being able to still work within the health center and the hospital, and still prescribe and consult and do all of those
Yeah,
things clinically too. So you
yeah.
found your balance, which is great. Not everyone can say that.
Yes, of course, my passion is always going to be teaching. And I think I go with the principle of naturopathy, where doctor is supposed to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And, even with my clinical practice, one of the most important areas that I do is probably lifestyle counseling. Uh, I keep telling my patients that it's not enough that you come to our center and do what we are telling, but it has to go back and reflect in your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. I think that is one of the key reasons why naturopathic medicine is so um, effective is because we do focus on the lifestyle, which is
Absolutely.
day-to-day things that you do that impacts your health. Um, and so it sounds like there is a lot of overlap in the philosophy. And I think one of the other things that stood out to me was you had kind of described it that Ayurvedic medicine was kind of more of where the botanical prescribing comes in.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then, but naturopathic medicine and yoga, although it sounds like you had mentioned that there are doctors doing variations, so kind of
yeah.
like how we have here in the US, where some people focus more so on the elemental aspects of naturopathy, and then others focus more on the nutraceuticals and the botanicals and
Yeah.
IV therapy, that sort of thing. So yeah, can you kind of describe what that looks like in India?
Yeah, I mean, the basic theme with which yoga and naturopathy was brought in as a single system was that both the focus is drugless, and even with nutraceuticals, we are basically extracting some form and giving that as in a form of a pill. So, of course, as we are evolving the practice of naturopathy in India, we are not saying no that nutraceuticals is bad or something, but we go with a more drugless approach where it's to do with your lifestyle, it's to do with the whole food that you consume rather than the parts of foods that are in nutraceuticals. Of course, herbs are definitely part of Indian kitchens.
Yeah.
Even otherwise, we use turmeric in almost every preparation that we make. We use ginger. we use garlic, we use onions. So the kind of you need not really extract things. Rather, you can have them in more natural form, is what we really believe in. And that's where yoga being drugless, the application of yoga in therapy gels extremely well with the approach in naturopathic medicine. And that's where it is brought together. Also, philosophically, yoga actually means, I mean, I'm also aware that yoga is looked at as a more physical practice of, doing flexibility and the postures. But the philosophy of yoga is to unite yourself with who you really are, and self-realization is the goal. Or if I want to put it in my own way, I would say it is realizing your nature.
Mm.
And when I say my inner nature, I talk of yoga. When I say I want to relate to my external nature, it's naturopathy. And that's how beautifully they are blend together. So that's the way with which we go. And therefore, yoga and naturopathy is practiced in India as a separate entity, whereas Ayurveda is more to do with the herbal medicine, the prescriptions that come from the heritage again that we have with the Indian tradition of Ayurveda. And there is a separate medical program, and there are specializations that people can do within Ayurveda. In fact, the surgery, the first surgeon in the world was an Ayurvedic physician known Sushruta. So the texts of surgery were written about 5,000 years ago, and that's the kind of heritage that we're talking about.
Mm. And thank you for, I mean, you put that so beautifully, that symbiotic relationship between yoga and naturopathy, and how they really are they can be used so well together. And that was another thing that when we met that you had explained, and it just makes so much sense, because I think here it is seen more physical, although I think people are starting to kind of dive into more of that breath work, and trying to tap into the true meaning of yoga. But it's still very much used more as an exercise.
I mean, looking at it philosophically, the definitions of yoga is all about mind. It's nothing to do with body.
Mm.
We talk of how it's having control over the mind is what is spoken as yoga, and the physical part of it is a very small fraction of it. And essentially, if we are trying to understand why the physical practices, the postures are done, again, when we're talking of the mind, we are either dwelling in the past or in future. We are never in the present. And again, you can call it mindfulness, you can call it yoga, you can call it anything that you want. But when you're probably standing on one leg, or you're doing a headstand, you can't think of your past or future. You're there. And that's the beauty. So the physical part of yoga is actually meant to connect you with your present, and not meant for just the flexibility part of it or the therapy part of it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if you could give maybe some examples. So it sounds like in your practice, you work a lot with obesity, hypertension, and other cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, back pain, arthritis, so many things. I'm kind of curious if you could maybe just give an example. If you have someone coming in with hypertension, what are some of the practices? I guess what does that look like for you, as far as the lifestyle recommendations, and how does that integrate with yoga? If you could just kind of give maybe an example.
Yeah, it's there are two things probably again which differentiates the practice of naturopathic medicine in India and probably the Western approach to it. It's more of a clinic-based approach in the West, where a patient comes to you and you prescribe and then counsel them and they go back. Whereas in India, by far, naturopathy has been practiced as a retreat-based modality, wherein the patient comes and stays with you in your facility in a very controlled environment where the diet is modified. They undergo hydrotherapy, they have mud therapy, there is acupuncture, there is, of course, yoga. So all of that together is given as a package when they are with you. And then we do have the dietary modifications or the yoga prescription. Say we tell them to do some specific yoga practices which are recommended for their health problem when they go back, or we ask them to do certain physical exercises or some nutritional changes or dietary modifications that are suggested to go back and do when they're back in their environment. Of course, there are also some hydrotherapy measures. We do ask them to drink a lot of water, which again is something that is missed as a common practice. We use fasting in especially when they are with us in our retreat centers, and we do recommend them to go back and continue to do intermittent fasting, especially with obesity, but it's not limited to obesity. As we understand today, it's the whole range of problems that we're talking about for which fasting can be really, really nice. And as a student, when I was learning in my medical college, uh, I misunderstood fasting as something to do with obesity because a lot of people who come to naturopathy centers in India, most of them have obesity as one condition which is there, and then they have comorbid diabetes, they have hypertension, or the musculoskeletal complications. So I was seeing that fasting is prescribed for all of them. But then I was fortunate to work with a couple of my seniors during my post graduation time in the clinical practice, who taught me that fasting is the time when you start healing from inside, and it is not limited to, say, a health problem. Rather, it is something that is given for everyone. And it's only now that we are talking of fasting being neuroprotective and preventing degenerative disorders or inflammation, anti-inflammatory effects or anti-cancer effects. But typically, in a very classical way in which naturopathy is practiced in India, I'm talking of people who started the naturopathic practice in India. I would say it was more of diet, it was fasting, and probably very simple hydrotherapy measures like probably enema and um, sitz bath or hip bath or something like that. Nothing very fancy. But today, of course, we have the colon hydrotherapy. We do have jacuzzis. So massages are incorporated. So a lot of variation is seen within the way naturopathy is practiced within India. We do have clinics where there are people who practice only acupuncture for pain. So there is a huge lot of variety with which naturopathy is approached in India by the practitioners.
Mm-hmm. And I remember because you had mentioned homeopathy as well, and aren't there hospitals almost just dedicated to homeopathic
Yeah,
medicine?
homeopathy is a different stream of medicine when it comes to the Indian classification. Like I said, the Ayush systems, we have Ayurveda, there is a separate medical program, and it is regulated by a different government agency. We have have yoga and naturopathy program, which is a separate medical program. For homeopathy, we have a separate medical program. So each one of them are different streams of medicine, and the practitioners do practice as a specialty. In recent times, I think in last 5-10 years, we are talking of integrating, practicing that as an integrative medicine. And again, our university is trying a lot of efforts to put in Ayurveda, naturopathy, yoga, acupuncture, physiotherapy, and the modern medicine put together. So we do have some big centers in India, like the tertiary care centers. There is an All India Institute in New Delhi, which is having a center for medical integrative medicine and research, which has opened up. There is a tertiary care mental health and neuroscience center in Bangalore, and they do have an integrative medicine center where there is an Ayurveda physician, there is a naturopathy physician. So people are now working together to give what is best for the patient.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if we could go back to what is a typical length of stay for someone that's coming in if you're doing mostly inpatient type of work?
Okay.
Yeah, what's a typical length of stay?
Yeah, it ranges again from different centers. In my center where I work in the university hospital, we do have programs for 1 week, which is minimum,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be based on the condition, it would be based on the medical advice. So typically people stay for 2 weeks or 3 weeks sometimes. There are people who have stayed for longer with really chronic problems or serious problems. For them, we may require to stay longer.
Mm-hmm. And do you ever recommend that they come back?
Yes,
Every
there is a very uh, simple way in which I talk to my patients when I want them to come back. Basically, these are lifestyle problems, and what we suggest is a dietary modification or a lifestyle modification. So once they are with you in your center, they see that there is a change. The weight reduces drastically because they're fasting, they're on a very regulated diet, they're undergoing therapies. So they have that motivation at that point, but then it goes on declining over a period of time. So typically I ask them, like, for your cars, you have a periodic service
Yeah.
that is required. Similarly, this is your body service center, and you need to come back, say, once in 6 months or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Probably what happens is, as uh, when you come to a center for the first time, probably you would require a longer stay. But second time you come, it is more of a refresher course. So you can stay for a week, get going, and then you can continue to do so. So that's how we ask people to come back based on their condition. Typically after 6 months, but sometimes after a year or something like that.
And so during that time, because like you said, doctor as teacher, so are you guys providing classes during that time or educating on how to make that a lifestyle change while they're
Yeah.
there?
Basically, we do have in our hospital where I work, we do have the group sessions for telling them how yoga works, how naturopathy works, how we understand the body and mind, and what is the connection. Why do people need to work with the body, mind, and breath? Um, and then what are the dietary changes that they need to do in general? So these are more group activities that we ask them to do. We also have condition specific sessions, like for hypertension, what are the specific changes that we need to do, or for arthritis, what specific changes would you like to do. And then on the third front, we also have the individual counseling. So there are the larger groups where we have common sessions. We have then disease-specific common sessions, and then there are individual counseling sessions that also happen. So it basically works that way.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it probably takes quite the team then to conduct all of this. So is there
Yes,
a
yes.
lot of
Our hospital is run by a medical doctor. She is MD and the youngest FRCP ever from the Royal College of Physicians. So she comes with the background of modern medicine, but she also integrates that with the knowledge of yoga. So she heads it, Dr. Nagratna, one of the most prolific researchers in yoga therapy. We do have a big team of about 30 Ayurveda doctors. We have close to about 30 naturopathy doctors. So each of these, we do not call them departments, we call them sections, which are based on the kind of health problems with which people come. So each has a medical doctor, each has a Ayurveda doctor and a yoga naturopathy physician, and we form a team, decide what would be the most suitable approach. Sometimes Ayurveda would be the primary approach, sometimes it will be naturopathy that will be the primary approach. So we discuss and decide on that. We do have a team of yoga therapists. We do have a team of Ayurveda therapists. We have the team of naturopathy therapists. We have physiotherapists. We have an acupuncturist. So a big team of people is definitely there. We do have counselors. Um, of course, we also, the physicians also act as counselors a lot of times. So as you said, we require that kind of a team to run the whole show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big team effort, but it sounds like you offer so many great modalities all within that time that they're there to really.
We don't really call the place, the university hospital that I'm referring to. We don't call it a hospital. We call it a health home. Translated in Sanskrit as Arogya Dhama. Arogya is health and Dhama is home. So we call it health home. We don't call the patients as patients. We call them therapy participants for a very specific reason. Um, the changes that we are trying to suggest in the lifestyle, they need to participate. And unless they participate, they will not be benefited of the therapy. And therefore, the approach is more patient-centric. It's not the physician-centric approach that otherwise would be there. I prescribe and it's done. So the therapy participants have a schedule starting at 5:30 in the morning. They have yoga sessions and the breathing sessions and meditation sessions and counseling sessions and all of that. And then the diet is regulated and they have naturopathy therapies or Ayurveda therapies. So it starts at 5:30 in the morning, goes on till 8 in the evening. So the whole day they are very, very packed. But that is the kind of impact that you need to create and show them that if you do drastic lifestyle modifications, you can actually modify the kind of problems with which you come. And that brings a lot of confidence in the patients that they can take charge of their health and remain healthy. And the approach is also not illness specific, it is rather wellness specific. And that's very important, because otherwise we start dealing with the conditions. We start talking of diet for hypertension rather than dealing with the person, again, which is one of our principles. So we will have to understand that it is the mind body complex that we are dealing with. We'll have to understand that at a very subtle level, and we cannot just do a superficial job in terms of the delivery of healthcare.
Mm-hmm. That's really great, and I love that that reframe of therapy participants, because I think that's what some struggle with here in the U.S. is that reframe of putting the person back in charge of their health, and not. I mean, I think naturopathic doctors do a better job here than maybe the conventional system, but it's still, it's still a struggle because of how the healthcare system has kind of built around that model of pill for an ill, as
But
they call
then there is a lot of change that is happening. We are working with the MD Anderson Cancer Center. Our university has been tied up for research that we have taken in the US. It was a $4.5 million grant from NIH that we got for Yoga for Breast Cancer study, that we were a collaborative partner with the MD Anderson Cancer Center. Dr. Lorenzo Cohen is the primary investigator for the study. And a lot of these universities are now coming up with integrative center. Of course, I'm not very sure how much the naturopathic medicine practitioners are getting involved. There might be a lot of difficulties, but I'm very sure that that's the future. Integration is where we need to go.
Yeah, and I think that we're really seeing that, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, of the need for integration, for everyone to really work together and to help really build each person up for when things like this occur.
In fact, Government of India was very prompt in stating that people should undertake yoga. They should do dietary modifications to improve their immunity. They should probably take up Ayurvedic medicines to boost their immunity. So they actually brought in advisories for all this. They also have sanctioned a lot of projects on yoga and naturopathy in COVID-19 wards in conventional hospitals. So there are naturopathy doctors who are going to the COVID-19 patients who are isolated, teaching them yoga over there. And that is taken up as a research study now. We also have studies on Ayurveda coming up. There are a lot of studies that are done on yoga and COVID-19. So there is a sense of integration and the top-down approach. Even the government agencies are looking forward to all these things now. So it's a great privilege to work in a place where there is opportunity to help in the entire healthcare system.
Yeah, that's a huge momentum forward, and I'm really happy to hear that at least that's happening where you're at. I think that they're starting.
So this is not in our center. Our center has been involved with the yoga research that is happening in a few medical centers, but the other naturopathy research that I was talking about is happening in a neighboring state where I live, in the state of Tamil Nadu. So there the government is very proactive. The state governments has taken it up and people are doing it.
That's really great. It's always nice to hear, though, that there's some momentum going. And I'm wondering if we could backtrack a little bit, and if you could just how would you explain the philosophy and the principles of naturopathic medicine, of naturopathy and yoga, to someone coming in? I'm just really curious how you would explain it.
Well, I have been teaching philosophy of naturopathy to my students for quite some time now. So, and this is a very fundamental question when the students get in. Of course, we go with the same principles which are taken up by the World Naturopathy Federation. the 6 basic principles. Um, and we do believe that the body has the ability to heal, and our job as physicians is rather to assist the process of healing rather than saying that, I can cure everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because we do understand that there are healing crises, as described by probably the American naturopaths earlier, whether it was Lindlar or Kuhne. And naturally that philosophy comes in. Of course, uh, it being drugless is one of the most important things that we integrate. And probably the best thing that we do in India, which is probably not there across the world, is integrating it with yoga uh, at the level of curriculum. Although I understand that even in the US and across the world, naturopaths are the ones who are very keen in learning yoga therapy and applying meditation and all of that, but it is not part of the curriculum. But here the curriculum in itself is designed in such a way that you learn the fundamentals of naturopathy, you learn the fundamentals of yoga, you know how to integrate them together. And as I mentioned it earlier, yoga is realizing your nature, and the internal nature is yoga, external nature is naturopathy. And the application of therapy would rather be naturopathy rather than yoga. So when we are talking of the drugless approach of naturopathy, yoga when applied as therapy is drugless, and therefore it's a beautiful symbiosis that is brought in within the system here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it sounds like, because here if you ask what a naturopathic doctor does, you often hear botanical medicine, homeopathy, hydrotherapy. Some do IV therapy.
Acupuncture.
Mm-hmm. Yep, some of them are intertwined with acupuncture. But it sounds like in India that would more so be hydrotherapy, diet, lifestyle, counseling, which we do
Massages.
here.
Yeah.
So
Massages, yoga, we do have color and magnets, so the electromagnetic therapies. We do understand the physical medicine and rehabilitation part of it. So the exercise, the biomechanics of it. We do have manipulative therapies. We have acupuncture and acupressure. So it's a very big blend of things.
mm-hmm.
The 5.5 year medical program that we have about 22 subjects that we learn, and that includes understanding the anatomy, physiology, the modern medical system, the basic medical sciences. We do understand pathology and the diagnostics from that end. We learn from philosophy to practice of naturopathic medicine and the basic fundamental principles of yoga to the application in not just therapy but in real life, in stress management and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have research methods. The students are supposed to do their dissertations, and they learn in that process how you're just translating your philosophy in a language which is acceptable to probably the modern medical world. So we try and bridge those two when within the curriculum there are provisions to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, how is naturopathic medicine and yoga, how is it viewed in India on a more public scale?
Okay. It's a variety that we see within India. Today, when I graduated in 2009, I think there were about 10 colleges, but within the span of 10 years that I graduated. Now we have close to 45 colleges. And earlier it was only in the southern part of the country that we had these colleges, but now it's pan-India. We have colleges in northern part of the country, we have it in the central part of the country, we have in the southern part of country. So what has happened is there is a huge demand that has come up. Also, in terms of the popularity of yoga that came up with the International Day of Yoga and the government pushing hard for propagating the healing methods in yoga, people took up naturopathy from 2015. There is a larger demand that has been created again ever since the United Nations has recognized the International Day of Yoga. On the flip side of it, the integrative medicine concept is coming up, and the medical fraternity is becoming more aware, and naturopathy being drugless is something that is very useful to them, because they do not have worry about the drug interactions and what happens with the medicine, and therefore yoga and naturopathy becomes one of the most convenient choice for integration when it comes to the Indian setup. So we do have large cancer hospitals where our people are working. There are cardiology centers where people are working. There are diabetology centers where people are working. We do have people working in tertiary care centers, in mental health centers. So that is the clinical part where people are working with the conventional medical fraternity. People do have standalone naturopathy retreat centers. In the state where I practice, I think I know at least 4 large centers, one where I graduated from, one where I work, and there are a couple of more. And each one of them can house about 250 plus patients at a time.
Wow.
And typically, if you want to be admitted to any of these centers as a patient, you will have to wait for at least a couple of months. So that's the kind of demand that we're talking about. Also, government is recognizing naturopathy as something that is useful, and they're coming up with something called as lifestyle clinics. Especially one particular state in India called the state of Tamil Nadu. They absorbed close to about 100 naturopathy yoga graduates last year for these lifestyle centers, and they are serving more than 100,000 people a year in one state of India. So the demand is huge. On the other side of it, we do have these specialty centers where people are doing only yoga therapy, only acupuncture. There are daycare centers where people are going to take up massages or lifestyle counseling or dietary counseling, etc. Another big area of practice is wellness. People are working with large hotel groups, the star hotels that are there in India. Most of them are managed by the yoga naturopathy graduates. So they do run these spas and wellness centers. A lot of people do go to the cruise ships as acupuncturists. So a lot of my students are in Miami and a whole range of places in the US, from where the cruise ships are traveling from Atlantic. A lot of people also go to, I mean, the graduates from our colleges, they go to Far East. So the again, the wellness centers in Malaysia and Thailand and the Bhutan. So a lot of these countries are taking up naturopathy, and there is demand for naturopathy physicians from India to these countries now.
Wow. Well, it sounds like there's a ton of opportunities, which is great to hear. We are still, I feel like, gradually getting there here in the US. It is not quite that high of a demand yet, but it's definitely getting there. And you also mentioned that there's some people that will go and study in the UK and New Zealand um,
Yeah.
for various um, further education. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So a few of my students are doing their masters in UK, in a couple of universities, and they are pursuing their masters in psychology. They are doing their masters in nutrition, in diabetes. A couple of them are doing that. One of my seniors, he got his PhD in nutrition from New Zealand. So there is a huge range of things that people are doing. A couple of my friends and colleagues have actually traveled to the US and done the ND program over
Oh,
there, and they're practicing in the US itself.
oh, great. That's wonderful. Um, and let me see here. Is there anything from your research that really stands out to you that you are really excited to um, to find or to have been able to research? Anything really
Okay,
exciting or
I am
interesting?
Yeah, I have been primarily a yoga researcher for the research part of it, and my area of research has been yoga breathing and its effects on human body and mind. And of course, there are meditation studies. Our center has been doing a lot of studies with the clinical part of it. Last year, we just completed a study on yoga for diabetes, and it was a pan-India study where we screened about 1.5 million people, and 150,000 diabetes and pre-diabetes patients received yoga as intervention, and we could do a lot of work, and these publications are now coming up. We already have about 15 of those publications. Uh, our university was involved with very interesting studies, not my study, but I'm just trying to talk about the other work that has happened. I'll come back to what things I have also been involved with. So one of my dear friend could go to Antarctica for a yoga research study, looking at the changes in extreme climatic conditions. And what he finds is very interesting. There is a particular gene called keratin gene, which is essentially non-functional in human being. That's why we do not have too many hairs, the skin is thin, and all of that. But in an extremely cold condition like Antarctica, um, if you do yoga, the keratin gene starts getting expressed. Now,
Wow.
what we're talking is yoga does what is good for you in your conditions.
Hmm.
So that is something
Yeah.
amazing, you know. So we're not just talking of, you do this and something would happen, but what we're talking is the intelligence of human system as a body mind system, and the way it can manipulate itself if given an opportunity. Okay, and that's what we have been talking about in terms of the healing ability of the body,
Mhm.
right? So
So
that's something amazing.
yeah, so is that with if they're exposed to the cold while doing yoga or
No. They were in the exact dresses that they are in.
interesting?
So the other thing probably that I have worked on was yoga breathing. A lot of work I have been doing, and what we understand is there is a state of physiological status of the human body where you are alert, you're attentive, but typically when you're alert or attentive, you go in a state of sympathetic arousal. Typically, you're not very relaxed. But what we find with my studies and the other studies from a lot of colleagues is um, not just yogic breathing, but meditation practices or yoga practitioners in general, they're very calm. There is a lot of parasympathetic activity that happens, but at the same time, their perceptions are at a higher level. The memory is better. The attentiveness is better. So that's exactly what we're talking about in terms of yoga. We get in a different state of physiology where you are relaxed and attentive at the same time, and this again otherwise doesn't happen. um, the other work that we were doing was yoga in occupational health. I have been working with a couple of my doctoral students and the master's students who are doing their thesis work with me, and we could find that yoga was useful in preventing the complications of standing for a real long time. In industries, people need to stand in a posture for about 8 hours, and that would lead to a lot of vascular degenerations. So that is one work that we were able to do. A recent work that we are trying to do, I have associated with my father for that, is not just yoga, but lifestyle in general. And that includes diet, that includes physical activity, that includes the harmony of mind and body, um, and counseling and all of that for diabetes reversal. We have been talking of uh, diabetes reversal, and we started this during the COVID-19 situation. Actually, all these sessions are online. We are able to monitor the blood sugar levels, and there are medical doctors on the panel who advise on the medications. There are yoga naturopathy physicians who are advising on the diet part and the exercise part and the mind part of it. And we already have had about 35 people who could enroll in 2 batches. And what we see is within a week's time, we need to actually cut down on the medications that they require, and their blood sugar levels are normal. The insulin levels are going down that are required. So all of that is extremely beneficial. And there were a couple of people who were just diagnosed to be diabetic with their HbA1c as high as about 11, and they did not start with medicines. And with the lifestyle changes that we're talking about, they have been able to come back to normal HbA1c within the first 3 months. And it's only the diet and exercise and the mental modifications that we have been doing. That's something exciting for us. Of course, to call it reversal, we will have to wait for some time, maybe about 6 months to a year, and follow them up for a longer time. But the results are extremely promising, and that's probably something that I would take up as my next research venture.
Yeah. Oh man, that's really great. Especially, I mean, so they began seeing changes within a week, you said.
Yeah, especially with diabetes, it's very simple. The blood sugar levels are so much related to what you eat. The third day of what you're doing, you start getting your results, and that also motivates you as a participant to do push yourself and do some activities in terms of the lifestyle modifications. When you're talking of obesity or high blood pressure, it may take some time to see those changes. So people require that immediate change to remain motivated and to do things.
Mm-hmm. And how do you, I'm curious if you have any pearls of wisdom on how you help to keep people motivated um, for those that are um, more long term, like hypertension, and it might take a little bit longer to see those
Yeah,
results.
one of the things that we have been doing was the group therapy. I mean, we now use a lot of technology in terms of the WhatsApp and the virtual meetings, wherein every week we kind of meet together and share experiences. So they learn from each other. And a lot of times on WhatsApp, it is real time.
Mm.
So it's easy for them. The other part of the lifestyle that we have been talking about was motivation, and motivation not just in terms of their health but overall. So we bring in role models who could do something very differently in their life. Um, so just a couple of examples from the program where we are just talking. There is an 82-year-old participant uh, who did his post-graduation in 1961 when my father was not born. Um, and he had a stroke, he was paralyzed, and then now he last year ran a half marathon, 5 kilometers in 45 minutes.
Wow.
And when he enrolled for our program, he said, I'm going to be definitely quitting all my medications. That is the kind of confidence with which he talks about it. And he says, I'm definitely going to live for 18 more years.
That's great. Oh my goodness.
So once you have somebody like that talking to you, you can push yourself in doing whatever changes are required.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you utilize both group, that community, um,
Yeah.
as well as having those role models. So those are definitely two great tips for people who want to, better help motivate their own participants. I still love that you um, yeah. Is there anything else um, with how naturopathic medicine is utilized in India? I'm also kind of curious about, because so one element that has really fascinated me, well, two of them are water and sunlight,
Yeah.
because I think that they're underutilized, but they're becoming more talked about lately, at least here in the US, as well as things like forest bathing, and I'm just kind of
Mhm.
curious what role those play in how you formulate a treatment plan. If
Yeah, one of the things definitely is the vitamin D deficiency that we're talking about, which is associated with the whole range of metabolic disorders. And therefore, whenever we ask our participants to practice yoga when they're doing at home, we ask them to do it probably under sunlight, with a direct exposure. Um, of course, we ask them at least half an hour in the day, they should expose themselves to sunlight. Water drinking is one of the most important things that we keep talking about, because again, something that has been missed a lot of times is the connection that we have with the gut and the rest of the body. And a lot of times, if your gut is fine, everything else would be fine. And that is where drinking good amount of water, eating good food, which is having fresh, holistic. We do emphasize on a lot of time vegetarian food, or sometimes even vegan food,
mm,
uh, which probably is again something maybe more unique to the Indian tradition uh, of the approach to naturopathy, because a lot of people in India vegetarians,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes naturally to them. So drinking water, to utilizing it for therapy, is again something that we extensively do.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious what your take is on raw food versus, so in Chinese medicine, at least, we're taught often it's better to at least steam your food,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
have it more warm.
Yeah.
But there's like that raw food movement that's happened, and we at thinking of it in a Chinese medicine viewpoint, that could induce cold and
Yeah. In fact, it's a very similar approach that is taken up by Ayurveda as well. In fact, Ayurveda doesn't recommend raw food uh, unless really required. But the naturopathic practitioners in India definitely recommend raw food. A lot of salads, a lot of sprouts. So, in fact, in my clinical practice, I recommend people to eat at least one meal as completely raw. And that helps in terms of the bulk of food, one, the taking care of their gut, another part. The other part would be also, restricting the calories. So all of that can easily be done using raw food, and therefore, at least I recommend it in my practice a lot of times. Of course, there are individual cases where I may not recommend it, where there might be the inflammatory bowel diseases, where there are lesions in the gastrointestinal tract. There, you may be avoiding it. But one of the things that I keep telling my participants is to clean the raw food that they use. That is going to be the key. The second major issue that comes in whenever we're talking of raw food now is the amount of pesticides and fertilizers that are put in. And therefore, as much as possible, we do recommend organic. Millets is another thing that we recommend because they're low on carb, high on fibers, and all of that. So there are these specific things that we do, but then it would be more customized based on the participants and their conditions and the chronicity of that, and whole range of things.
Yeah, I was just really curious if since you mentioned that you practice acupuncture, I was just really curious how, if there was any of that philosophy that played into it. Is there a certain time of day that you recommend eating that raw meal more so than other times of days, or does
Okay, the classical naturopathy practitioners, in fact, I would include myself in them. We recommend 2 meals a day, not the typical 3 meals a day. And the ideal timings for that is you have a kind of a brunch at about 10:30, 11 in the morning, and you should have your dinner before the sun sets. And I'm talking of Indian context, where the sun sets typically by 6:30. So until it becomes dark. So by about 6:37 in the evening, you have your dinner. Uh, so that has been a practice in most of these retreat centers that we're talking about. They do recommend 2 meals a day, and they provide, say, sometimes the sprouts or some juices in case people feel hungry in between. But the major meals are there, and that also brings in the concept of intermittent fasting within the meals, which could be extremely beneficial. It also would take care of the insulin activity in the body. So the whole range of uh, scientific reasons approach to that is definitely there, and it is proven beyond doubt that that is the most rational approach.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just really curious. What about teas and coffee and things like that? Are those considered more Ayurvedic, or do you incorporate those as well, or are they seen as potential drugs?
Yeah, anything that can create a habit is considered to be bad, because you start depending on them. And typically with tea or coffee, you start getting dependent on uh, typically coffee. So we do have herbal preparations where you use ginger, pepper, lemongrass. You basically boil them like a tea and use that. If you really require something hot, something that you want to soothe yourself with, but the typical naturopathic approach is to avoid tea or coffee. And there is a very peculiar way in which tea and coffee is made in India. We mix it with milk. We add a lot of sugar, and that is a very bad approach. And therefore, if at all you really want to have tea, you should go for green tea with probably honey as a sweetener, and do not add milk to it. Black coffee is always going to be better than the milk mixed coffee. So those are, if people are not ready to change those habits, then these are the alternatives that we would recommend.
I'm just always curious because there's, at least here in the U.S., there's like people have conflicting opinions about it, but that's
Yeah.
my philosophy on it as well. Is it addictive? Do you absolutely need coffee to get out of bed? Then maybe that's something to look more into versus something occasional. And there's some people that just live off of coffee and caffeine, and so I was just kind of curious.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, is there anything else, either philosophically or within the principles that that you think might differ or stand out in the way that you practice versus other parts of the world?
Well, I'm not very sure of how things are in the other parts of world, but I think allowing the healing to happen, uh, and the physician being just a media in the process, and taking the participant as the center point of the whole process of therapy is the best way to approach naturopathic medicine or yoga, and that is because the healing has to happen from inside, and that's the whole center point that attracts me to the practice of naturopathy and yoga, because it's just lovely the way you can discover yourself when you are with yourself, when either you're doing yoga or you are in a naturopathy retreat. In fact, people do not know what hunger means, and they need to do fasting to understand what really your body is telling you. So even that insight, looking in yourself, whether it's your body or mind, is going to be the key moving forward.
And do you have any favorite meditations or any favorite techniques that really help to allow someone into that state?
Well, the beauty of yoga, we can actually have another session on yoga, which could be a very big one.
Yeah.
Uh, but the beauty is that there is an absolute flexibility
Mhm.
in terms of how do you want to approach going in. Uh, Philosophically, there are different school of thoughts when it comes to the practice of yoga, and by and large, they can be classified into four different approaches. You can realize who you are by reasoning, the path of knowledge, by devotion, the path of love, uh, the path of control on mind, which is typically the Ashtanga yoga, the physical practices, the breathing work, and the meditation that you talk about. And then there is a path of work, making your work as worship. And this you can either choose one or a mixture of these based on your personality, because each one of us is going to approach to things differently, and that's why that kind of flexibility is allowed within the yoga practices. Personally, I just love the practice of what is called a cyclic meditation, which was developed by our university. We also have the yoga nidra, which is the practice of being aware of your body and working with the awareness and transcending the physical awareness. My personal favorite is, of course, breathing, because that has been something that I have worked on. So different kinds of breathing practices are available, and it's very easy to control your breath and thereby your mind. And that is another personal favorite of mine. So frankly, I am not a person who believes too much in bending the body for achieving the effects of yoga. But then that approach is definitely there. There are people who are more to do with their physical self, and for them, bending the body is going to be extremely useful. There are cleansing practices in yoga where you have the nasal cleansing. People are made to drink water and vomit or pass through the stools. So a lot of those practices are there which can be extremely useful. Uh, and therefore, there is a whole range that we can follow.
Hmm. It all comes down to individualized
Absolutely,
medicine, right? That's
absolutely,
the
yeah.
beauty of naturopathy and of yoga. Um, so I just want to kind of wrap this up with what keeps you inspired in naturopathic medicine and yoga and hopeful for the future of healthcare.
Um, my inspiration is probably both my teachers and my students.
Mm.
I was fortunate to have some really great teachers who could get me in the path of yoga and naturopathy. And uh, on the flip side of it, my students, they keep me motivated. They keep me on my toes to learn more and deliver. Uh, a big challenge is to keep the young generation motivated,
Mm.
and to motivate them, you need to be motivated. So that is another thing. And the third thing possibly is the kind of results that we can deliver with simple things, simple modifications in the lifestyle, uh, whether it is people who are sick or people who are healthy. Can we promote health? Can we prevent the illnesses, or can we manage the illnesses that they have? Can we restrict the complications of the health problems? And when I see a patient smiling because their pain is relieved, that is such a moral booster that keeps you going. And I have multiple of them whom I was able to help. In terms of where we are going to head with the whole thing, it is going to be individualized medicine. It is going to be integrative medicine. No one single system is going to be working, whether it is the medical, modern medical system, or even naturopathic system or yoga system. It has to be integrated and customized for the patients, and therefore the individualized integrative medicine is the future of what I see. And that is where probably I would love to invite um, people to our university. We have been doing some good work in terms of integration. And also, we have a whole range of programs which are available. Um, Both physically, there are people who, the range of programs include yoga programs ranging from 1 month to a doctoral program. We run 3 medical programs within the campus. And there are also programs available in the distance mode. So you could be wherever you are and learn things. Uh, of course, with COVID-19, we are also evolving uh, different other modalities. There is a sister university getting established in the US, Vivekananda Yoga University, with I think its headquarters in Texas. Uh, so you would have opportunities to also, work with them. So it's a huge thing, and we believe in collaboration with everyone. We do not really think one school of thoughts is the right way, because none of them are really complete. Nature has not created anything complete, and therefore integrating whatever is the best is going to be the key. And that is the kind of philosophy with which we work. The philosophy of our organization, the founders of our organization, has been to bring the best of the East and the best of the West. The best of the West is the modern scientific approach, the rational approach, looking at things more with the lens of science, and the Eastern approach of the philosophy and the way you look at holistically about things. And that's the way forward. We will have to work together. And it's probably again what we have done today. Somebody from the East is talking to somebody from the West about the best practices that we follow.
Yes, and hopefully we can continue having those conversations and learning and sharing knowledge wherever we can. So thank you so much for your time. And where can people find more information about your university, or about just where to learn more?
Our university website is www.svyasa, that is SVYASA.edu.in. I'll probably text you that, and you can probably link that. I do have my personal page as well. If people want to connect with me, they can definitely connect on that. They can connect on my Twitter handle, or even on Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm available on all of them.
Okay, great. Yeah, and
they can write to me on email as well. I do respond to WhatsApp as well, so I can share those information with you, and you can possibly share with people. No problem.
Okay, great. All right, I'll be sure to link some of those things in the bio. So thank you again, Dr. Parr. It's been so great seeing you again and speaking with you, and I love talking philosophy and just learning all that there is out there in the world. So I really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much, Kierstin, for inviting me, and it was really lovely talking to you. It's whenever we talk of these things, it's more of a reinforcement
Mm-hmm.
about the core philosophy with which we're working.
Mm-hmm.
And it's lovely if more people can be influenced with the kind of knowledge that we have, and we share that and integrate. So
Mm-hmm.
I would love to talk to you again if it is required, and we could possibly have more discussions on more specific things. Probably this was a very
Yeah.
elaborate general picture.
And
We can also work on something that way.
that would be
Thank you
great.
so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe and share to keep the inspiration going. I hope you stay well and stay inspired.